Welcome, everyone. This workshop is the second of 3 webinars designed to build the capacity of educators to leverage technology to deliver quality remote instruction. The first workshop focused on student engagement. In this session, we'll discuss best practices for monitoring student progress and for providing feedback in a virtual environment. The third workshop will focus on designing effective instruction for a hybrid model. We provided a live virtual session of this training to Tennessee educators in January of 2021. While this is an asynchronous recording, we will still provide the discussion prompts and poll questions that we administered during the training. During this time, we encourage you to pause the recording and reflect on these questions, either individually or if you're watching this recording on your own or with a small group. Before we get into the content, we'll take a moment to highlight some key features in the Zoom platform that may be helpful to know if you implement this training virtually. The bar on the bottom is your control panel. You can mute yourself or hide your video using the microphone and camera buttons on the bottom left. We encourage you and those you meet with to leave your video on when feasible, particularly when in small group breakouts, to help facilitate conversation. During the live session, we used the chat to gather responses from participants to a number of prompts. They also used the chat to submit questions along the way. If you decide to organize breakout room discussions, participants will see this message inviting them to join. If they need to return to the main room at any point during a breakout session, they can select Leave Breakout Room button. So now let's review the workshop agenda. We'll do welcome and introductions, review train the trainer structure, provide an overview of formative assessment, then review effective strategies for monitoring student progress and for providing feedback. Then we'll wrap things up and outline next steps. During the live session, we administered a poll asking participants about their professional role. You might consider adapting this poll for your audience. One of the ways to enhance engagement is to establish a social presence when presenting online. It's a way to facilitate communication so that you feel like you're engaging in human-to-human interaction rather than human-to-machine interaction. It sets the stage for things like getting to know each other and developing a sense of connection. Each workshop facilitator will introduce themselves and establish a social presence by revealing their COVID hobbies, that is, activities they would not normally have spent time on if not for the increased time at home. I'll go first. I'm Victoria Schaefer. My COVID hobby is spending time walking my 2 dogs. Now I'm going to turn to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma. I am a research associate at REL Appalachia, and my COVID hobbies include cooking, reading, and doing puzzles. I'll turn it over to Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Clute. I'm also with REL Appalachia, and my COVID hobby has been doing a lot of jigsaw puzzles. Jill?
Thanks, Mary. My name is Jill Marcus, and I'm a technical assistant associate. I have a puppy, and because my COVID hobby has been puppy wrangling. There's a sound effect for you.
Hi, my name is Beth Peary, and I'm a project team member for REL Appalachia. And my COVID hobby for the past year has been writing a story in my free time, just for fun.
So you may encourage participants to introduce themselves in the chat and share their own COVID hobby when you implement this workshop yourself. Before we move on, we'd also like to recognize other REL Appalachia staff members whose contributions were integral to the development of this workshop, including Mnet Shibare, Corey Hamilton Viagas, Jessica Miss Levy, and Stephanie Wilkerson. We also want to take a minute to acknowledge a group of educators from the region and representatives from the Niswonger Foundation. They serve as our partners, and we've worked closely with them to design this workshop to specifically meet the needs of educators in Tennessee. We are so grateful for their partnership on this work. The workshop facilitators are part of the Regional Educational Laboratory Program administered by the U.S. Department of Education, Institute of Education Sciences. The 10 regional educational laboratories, or RELs, work in partnership with stakeholders to conduct applied research and trainings. The mission of the REL program is to support a more evidence-based education system. Through the REL program, we carry out 3 main activities. We conduct a wide variety of applied research studies. We provide educators and other stakeholders with training, coaching, and technical support needed to use research findings and evidence in the classroom to improve teaching and learning. And we disseminate findings from research in ways that educators and policymakers can use in practice. In short, the REL program offers support to state education agencies, local education agencies, and schools that helps practitioners use evidence-based practices. This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. We at REL Appalachia are working with our states and districts on quite a diverse set of projects. In the Appalachian region, we partner with a variety of state and local stakeholders in Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia to work on several education-related issues, including improving post-secondary transitions, early literacy, using data and evidence across the states, and more. For more information about the projects that we are working on, we encourage you to visit the REL Appalachia website at the link shown on the screen. Now, Emma, I will turn to you to describe the Train the Trainer structure.
Thanks so much, Victoria. Before we transition to the workshop content, I just want to take a few minutes to review the Train the Trainer workshop series structure. This workshop is designed for you to take to your home district and present to your colleagues, either all at once, as we'll do today, or in 3 sections. You can see that there are 3 sections of content here. Overview of formative assessment, effective strategies for monitoring student progress in a remote setting, and effective strategies for providing feedback in a remote setting. Each of these sections can be presented in a different session if that's what works for you. If you have more than 30 minutes to present a section, then you can allow for more time for interactivity. If you decide to present the sections on different days, you'll want to use the same welcome, introduction, overview, and wrap-up materials each time. It might be good to start thinking about whether it's possible to fit this content in within a larger professional development effort that your school or district is making, so that you can leverage those accompanying supports. For example, if your district has a professional development day scheduled where people have different options to choose from, this workshop could be presented as one of those options. To support you in delivering the trainings, we've developed a slide deck you can use in your trainings, handouts to share with your participants, and a facilitator's handbook. Here's what's in your facilitator's handbook. I have a copy of it right here. How to use the facilitator's handbook, welcome and introductions, overview of formative assessment, monitoring student progress, providing feedback, wrap up and next steps. We also offer best practices in facilitation, the handouts for the workshop, a sample workshop invitation, and alternative suggestions for creating breakout rooms and polls. Each of these sections, the welcome and introductions, overview of formative assessment, monitoring student progress, providing feedback, and wrap up and next steps, include an annotated agenda, detailed content information that provides additional context for the slides, and descriptions and a rationale for the activities. We'll be modeling some of these activities, check-ins, and best practices today. We're sure that you have a number of effective facilitation strategies that you'll like to use that will work as well. At the end of the handbook, you'll find a section on best practices in facilitation that you may find helpful, as well as the materials you should distribute as handouts, some language you can use to invite people to attend your workshop, and some alternative suggestions for creating breakout rooms and polls. When you see this icon, the Word document, on the slide, it's a signal for you to refer to the handouts in Appendix A of your Facilitator's Handbook. After each of our workshops, we want to offer some additional supports. We all know that just presenting information is never really enough. Good professional development includes opportunities for follow-up, individual attention, and interaction with other implementers. We're scheduling office hours where participants can get together to discuss any issues with presenting the training in their home schools. An FAQ document that will be available as a Google Doc for trainers to contribute to, and an email where you can send questions for our team to answer. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Mary.
Great. The next section will focus on formative assessment, but before launching into that content, we'd like to pause to reflect on how things are going with monitoring student progress and providing feedback in remote learning. At this point in the live workshop, we move participants to a virtual breakout rooms to engage in a fortunately, unfortunately activity. We ask them to share with their group one thing that is going well with monitoring students' progress and providing feedback, and one thing that is not going well. For example, a participant might have shared, "Fortunately, all of my students have Wi-Fi at home and can turn in assignments electronically. Unfortunately, I don't always have time to look at their work and give feedback promptly." Many of the participants in our live workshop weren't classroom teachers, but instead worked with teachers in other roles, such as instructional coaches. These participants could frame the activity differently. For example, "Fortunately, all of the teachers I work with are familiar with the importance of providing feedback. Unfortunately, many of them struggle with finding the time to provide it frequently." This is a good time to pause the recording to reflect on these questions on your own and to anticipate how this activity might work when you deliver the training. We are sure that you are familiar with different types of assessments and their purposes. The different types of assessments differ in a couple of key ways as depicted in this figure. First, they differ in the scope or how much content they cover. And second, they differ in the frequency of administration. This figure shows summative assessments at the top. They are given the least often and cover the widest range of content. Interim assessments are given more often and cover less content than summative assessments. Finally, at the bottom of the figure, we have formative assessment. It takes place the most frequently and covers the narrowest range of content. Formative assessment is a process that involves both gathering and using information about what and how students are learning. It can guide just-in-time adjustments to help students learn. Formative assessment is closely tied to what we are talking about today, monitoring student progress and providing feedback. Formative assessment involves 4 practices. These are described on this slide and in handout 1 on page 33 of your facilitator's manual. The first practice is clarifying learning. This involves identifying the learning targets so students know where they are headed. It also includes helping students understand what it will look like when they are successful. The second practice is eliciting evidence of learning. This involves gathering information about where students are in their learning throughout instruction. One way to gather evidence is through questioning. We're going to be talking a lot more about questioning later in this workshop in the section on monitoring student progress. The third formative assessment practice is providing feedback. Feedback should support students in moving forward with their learning and help them to better understand the material. As noted during the agenda, a whole section of this workshop is devoted to the topic of providing feedback during remote instruction. The fourth formative assessment practice is activating learners. Engaging in self-assessment, including setting learning goals and monitoring progress, can support students to develop a growth mindset and take more ownership for their learning. Strategies such as peer feedback can empower students to be resources for each other. We'll be talking a bit about peer feedback later during the feedback section of the workshop. Here's an activity that meets many of the purposes we just described. It addresses the adult learning principle that adults' previous experience must be respected and built upon, as described in the section on adult learning at the end of your Facilitator's Handbook. Of course, this principle is relevant to students as well. During this activity in the live workshop, we asked participants to list up to 3 ways they have collected formative assessment data in their in-person classroom in the past. If their role involves supporting teachers, we asked them to think of up to 3 ways the teachers they worked with have collected formative assessment data. We use Poll Everywhere to create this word cloud, and we've included instructions for you for how to set up your own word cloud in the Facilitator's Handbook on page 12. Here's an example, the word cloud that we generated during our live presentation here. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jill.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, so for this section, we're going to turn our attention to monitoring student progress in a remote setting. You're used to monitoring students all the time in an in-person setting, and there are lots of ways to do this. You move around the room, you watch the students while they work, you stop and help students here and there, and you watch their faces when you're presenting. But in a remote setting, you're no longer able to use all of these familiar techniques, so you need to find new ways to check students' learning progress and monitor their academic behaviors. Just one note about the term monitoring progress, by which we mean to what extent students are reaching their learning goals. This is different from the term progress monitoring, which is a more formal process that's implemented as part of response to intervention. Keep that straight. The information you gather as you monitor student progress can be used for a variety of things. One is to inform your instructional planning by highlighting content that students are struggling with, and also to inform feedback that you provide to students. Our goal today is to help you be mindful about what information you want to collect, how to collect it efficiently and use it to adapt your instruction, and how to provide students with timely feedback. We want to help you tailor your monitoring efforts to most of the tools you have available in a remote environment. We're going to focus more on what teachers can do with technology and less on the features of a particular learning management system or instructional program. It makes sense to begin with the tools you already have at hand, such as chat and poll features included in your conference platform to check on student learning. In this section, we will first spend a little time talking about selecting just the right questions to ask so that you can efficiently collect information about what your students know and can do. And next, we'll talk about how you might use data that is automatically collected from instructional technologies that you might be using. Then we will close out this section of the workshop by sharing examples of some free tools you might use to monitor student progress. The recommendations on this slide come from What Works Clearinghouse's practice guide on using technology to support post-secondary student learning. A practice guide is a publication that presents recommendations for educators to address challenges in their classrooms and schools. They're based on reviews of research, the experience of practitioners, and the expert opinions of a panel of nationally recognized experts. Although this practice guide is focused on post-secondary students, we think the recommendations could translate well to K-12 remote learning. In particular, recommendation 4 from the practice guide focuses on using technology to efficiently gather real-time information about student learning using polls, chat, and other easily accessible tools. Check out pages 39 and 40 in the Facilitator's Handbook to see the part of Handout 1 that has more information about implementing this recommendation. It describes the categories of questions presented on this slide and how they can be used. These types of questions can be posed to students using the chat or poll features of online learning platforms. They're described in more detail in Handout 2 on page 44 of the Facilitator's Handbook. You may be familiar already with the different levels of understanding that a student can demonstrate by responding to questions: recall, conceptual understanding, application, and critical thinking. To use the poll or chat feature to get a quick read on what students know and are able to do, or what additional supports they might need, the trick is to choose just a few questions that will give you the information you need. You may also want to check in with students about their attitudes and behaviors. For example, you could ask students questions about their opinions or perspectives on a topic. These types of questions can be used to facilitate discussion and promote student engagement. To get a sense of how well students think they understand a topic, you may want to follow a content question with a confidence level question, asking students to rate their confidence in their answers, high, medium, or low. This can help you decide whether it's time to move on or if more teaching is needed. It also serves to support students' metacognitive skills. Metacognition is the term for things like thinking about your own thinking and learning, as well as planning and self-monitoring your own learning processes. Monitoring questions give you information about how your students are approaching the learning process. For example, you might ask students how long they took to complete an assignment or how difficult they thought the reading assignment was. Hopefully, this organizer helps you to think about all of the different types of questions you can ask in a chat or poll and how to choose the one that best meets your intended purpose. You might also have access to data about student learning that you don't even have to collect. If you are using instructional technologies, you might have access to data that you can use to monitor student progress. My hunch is that you're all using different types of instructional technologies. Some examples include Dreambox Learning, Achieve 3000, and Assessments. It might be worthwhile to familiarize yourself with the types of data these technologies provide and how you might use them to monitor progress. For example, how many minutes are students engaging with the program? This might provide some information about how easy or hard students are finding the work or common places they get stuck. Are there certain questions that many students are answering incorrectly? This can provide information about common misconceptions that students hold. Some more sophisticated instructional technologies track how students interact with different parts of the platform. This could provide information about how students are approaching problems. For example, are they taking advantage of the tools that are available to help them solve the problem? You can integrate the data from these technologies with all of the other information you have about students, such as what you observe during in-person lessons and knowledge you've gained from reviewing their completed assignments, to gain a more complete picture of student progress. See page 36 of the Facilitator's Handbook to find the section of Handout 1 with more information about the information you can gather from instructional technologies. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Beth to talk about some specific tools that might be helpful.
Thank you, Jill. So in addition to using the digital tools you already have in your toolbox, there are lots of other tools out there that can help you monitor student progress. We listed some reasons why these other tools may be useful to you and your participants. For example, if you want to integrate some new activities that also allow you to monitor students in real time, you could try Kahoot. This is a game-based tool that engages students while also capturing data to help you assess their learning. Or if you're looking for alternative ways for students to show what they've learned, you could try Padlet. This provides an online wall where students can post images and text. We've described these digital tools in more detail in Handout 3 on pages 45 to 48 in your Facilitator Handbook. We're not promoting any of these specific tools, we're just showing them as examples of what is out there and how it might be used. If you choose to use any of these digital tools, we strongly recommend connecting with IT professionals in your school or district to confirm that these tools comply with your district's data security and privacy protocols. So next, we will present an example of how you can use one of these digital tools to monitor student progress. We chose Nearpod as our example. In your training, you can use this example or create your own using a different digital tool if there's one that's more familiar to the teachers in your district. We know you may be familiar with this tool, but for those of you who aren't, Nearpod allows you to create interactive lessons that can be integrated in your Google Slides. It provides 9 formative assessment tools that can be incorporated into these lessons. Then these lessons can be shared asynchronously or synchronously with your students. With the teacher view shown here, you can monitor student progress in real time as students submit responses. So here, you can see who has and who hasn't responded to an open-ended question. In this example, I might send a private message to check in with John about why he's not responded. Nearpod quizzes and poll features are different than, say, polling in Zoom, because you can see who answered and how in real time. This way, you can use the informative information to, for example, group students for additional instruction. Another benefit to Nearpod is if you have remote students and students in the classroom, you can use the same formative assessment tools simultaneously for both types of students. For example, you could project the Nearpod activities on a screen for your in-person students to do on paper, while the remote students complete it online. As you progress through the lesson and activities, all students will see the same thing. If there is not enough time to review the formative data during the class, there is also a session report that stores all the responses so you can review it at a later time. Pear Deck is a similar platform. Again, we recommend connecting with IT professionals in your school or district confirm that these tools comply with district protocols around privacy and security before they're integrated into instructional practices. During the live presentation of this workshop, we conducted a check-in activity that gave participants the opportunity to use Nearpod and demonstrate how students would see an interactive lesson. Participants responded to the prompts, what's a new idea you want to try and why? And what questions do you have at this time? Through a link to we shared the teacher view of participant responses during the presentation. You might consider facilitating a similar check-in activity using a tool such as Nearpod when you're presenting this information. You could also use the chat box for this check-in. Now I will turn it back over to Jill.
Thanks, Beth. Okay, next we'll talk about effective strategies for providing feedback in a remote setting. You can use information you collected through monitoring to provide students with feedback about their learning, and we will focus on that purpose now. At this point during the live presentation, we asked participants to use the chat to list characteristics of effective feedback, such as specific or timely. This is a good time to pause the recording and make your own list of the characteristics of effective feedback, either individually or with your small group. And then we'll take a look at the list that we found in the literature so you can see if there's anything there that's not on your list and vice versa. Here's what we found in the literature. It focuses on the task rather than the student. It provides information to enhance learning rather than just information about the accuracy of the responses. It's clear and specific, not too complex, offered in manageable amounts, linked to learning goals, delivered when there is still time to use it, and tailored to meet students' varying needs. That last bullet, tailored feedback to meet student needs, we mean that low achieving learners might benefit from more immediate feedback that's more directive, while high achieving learners might benefit more from feedback that's delayed or more facilitative, like hints or cues or prompts. So look at your list and this list and see if there's anything that's different. Some of the important characteristics of good feedback we just talked about are that it needs to be delivered in time to be useful and that it needs to be manageable for both you and the students. Here are two ideas for how to accomplish those goals. There's a link to these time-saving ideas and the resource they came from on page 19 of your Facilitator Handbook. We'll briefly describe these two strategies as a way to get you thinking about how to alter strategies you may already use for a remote setting. Being able to provide focused feedback quickly makes it easier to do more frequently. You'll remember delivered when there's still time to use it is one of the characteristics of effective feedback. It also gives you more regular personal interaction with students, which is needed at this time. Since students are now handing in their assignments electronically, here is an example of how you can use the Find feature of your word processing software to quickly review students' understanding. So let's say I just taught a mini lesson on how to use commas. I could ask students to write a one-page paper on any topic they wish, the only requirement being that they correctly use at least 4 examples of each type of comma the class has studied. Then I could use the Find function, the command F, to highlight all the commas in each piece. I can then quickly scan for correct and incorrect usage. I can use that information to provide feedback to the individual student or reteach a portion of the lesson to the whole class or subgroup as needed. Another helpful strategy for providing feedback in remote settings is holding a microconference. Conferencing one-on-one with students is valuable for 4 reasons. There's individualized instruction and feedback, misconceptions can be cleared up, relationships are built, and students feel heard by a caring adult. But even a 5-minute conference can take more time than is available. So the solution is focusing and structuring student conferences so they take 1 or 2 minutes. Here's an example of how to do microconferences during a unit on paraphrasing. Students write a rough draft of a paraphrasing paper and bring it to class. And then the class reads and discusses mentor text with strong paraphrasing. Students pick a page in their own drafts and highlight each incidence of paraphrasing. They rate each paraphrased passage from 1 to 10 based on the exemplar and write at least 4 sentences justifying their rating. If the students are in person, you can call the students over for a brief conference with each student sharing their ratings, comparing them to the exemplar, and guiding and encouraging them to improve their work. If you want to use microconferencing when you do not have students in person, you may be able to have a quick conversation with one student at a time when the whole class is logged in. Other students can either listen in or they can work on their own until it's time for their conference. You may need to set up a second conference site if you want to have a private conversation with each student while still monitoring the whole class. This approach uses time very efficiently. The students have already laid the groundwork and highlighted the paraphrased sections. It allows students and teachers to jump right in at a high level. By focusing on just paraphrasing, a minute is not too short to go deep, answer questions, and figure out meaningful action steps forward for the student. I hope these 2 ideas gave you some inspiration about ways to efficiently and effectively provide feedback to your students. Now it's back to Mary, who's going to share some more information from the research.
Thanks, Jill. Another strategy you might consider is providing audio or video recorded feedback. Much of the research on audio and video feedback has been conducted in university settings, although we did find one study that examined the use of this type of feedback with middle school students. Younger students may need more support to benefit from this type of feedback. Further details about this research can be found in Handout 1 on page 37 of your Facilitator's Handbook. The research we examined suggests that audio and video feedback can effectively provide information to enhance learning, which is one of the characteristics of effective feedback that we talked about earlier. This research suggests that students had positive perceptions of audio and video feedback. They found it motivating, they felt comfortable receiving it, and they found the feedback to be more personal than written feedback. Some research also suggests that teachers do not need to be too concerned about investing a lot of time into the production value of audio and video feedback. Students preferred receiving unedited feedback more promptly over waiting for more time for edited feedback. So no need to worry about all those times you might have said or whether your dog was barking in the background while you were recording feedback. Finally, we found one study that compared the use of audio feedback to written feedback. They found that the type of feedback students received was not associated with how well they did on the assignment, suggesting that audio feedback may be as effective as written feedback. Now Beth is going to share some tools you might consider for providing audio and video feedback.
Thank you, Jill. There are lots of free audio recording and video recording platforms available that are easy to use and do not require much, if any, editing. Some examples of these video and recording tools are Screencastify, Hippo Video, or TinyTake. Your computer may have a program for recording your screen or audio already. All of these digital tools are described in Handout 3 on pages 45 to 48 of your Facilitator Handbook. Again, we are not promoting any of these. These are just examples of what's available. When selecting an audio or video platform, consider any time limits to recording, any advertising with free versions, how difficult it is to learn, how easy it is to edit and share, the security of the tool, and how well it is integrated into your other platforms. Let's see an example of how we can provide student feedback using one of these tools. Screencastify is an example of a tool that you can use to record your screen as you provide feedback to students. It has a free version without ads that allows you to record 5-minute videos. Here's an example of me giving video feedback to one of our students from the earlier Nearpod example. help you answer the second part of the assignment, which is not clear yet in your paragraph. So once you've reviewed all the rainfall information about each city, please pick which city you would like to live in if you liked rain. Then clearly state which city you chose in your paragraph and write 1 or 2 reasons why you picked this city. Hi. In this video, I used the characteristics of effective feedback described earlier. I provided targeted feedback that linked back to the goal of the exercise. You'll notice I did not correct capitalization or spelling errors because I was prioritizing my feedback to save time and keep the feedback manageable. I also provided feedback to enhance learning and not only correct responses. For example, I asked her to find additional information that would help her complete the assignment more effectively. I focused on the task at hand and not the student, and I made the feedback as clear and as specific as possible. Additionally, I included a video of myself as I provided the feedback to add a personal touch in a remote setting. Since I was in a browser, I also used the annotated tools to draw attention to key areas and help me provide clear and specific feedback. To save time, I did not edit this video in any way so I could send to my student in a timely fashion. Remember, research shows students prefer timely feedback. In this case, I posted it to YouTube so students could watch it in any browser, but you can also send it via email. We use Screencastify as an example, but as I mentioned, there are many other tools out there, and a lot of them work in a similar fashion. If you're leading a training workshop, you can use this example or create your own using a digital tool if there is one that's more familiar to the teachers in your district. Now I'll turn it over to Mary.
Related to that fourth formative assessment practice, activating learners, peer feedback can provide a great opportunity to empower students to be resources for each other. It can be an effective way to deliver feedback when there's still time for it to be used, as we discussed when we talked about the characteristics of effective feedback. Research suggests that when students provide feedback for each other, they can increase their own understanding of the subject matter. The process of providing feedback to a peer enables them to see how other students approach the assignment, which may prompt self-reflection on their own work and may motivate them to improve their own work. Further, the act of providing feedback is complex. It requires students to assess the extent to which their peer met the expectations for the assignment, which requires critical thinking skills. And then they need to effectively convey their feedback, which provides an opportunity for them to practice their developing communication skills. Further details about this research can be found in Handout 1 on page 39 of your Facilitator Handbook. All of these potential benefits of peer feedback can be realized without necessarily increasing teachers' workload. The research we reviewed suggests 2 considerations for implementing peer feedback in online learning. First, you might want to think about how to support students to provide quality feedback by providing some structure, such as a rubric or a form for them to complete for their feedback. Another issue to consider is whether or not to make feedback anonymous. The research we located suggests that students gave feedback of similar quality when they were anonymous or identified. However, students may prefer to give anonymous feedback. Now Beth is going to talk about some ways you can implement peer feedback in remote learning.
Thank you, Mary. Now that we've reviewed the benefits of peer feedback and the research for implementing it online, we'll briefly discuss some of the digital tools that can be used to facilitate peer feedback. So we've listed some of these digital tools here. For example, PeerGrade and Peer Studio are tools specifically designed to facilitate peer feedback. Google Jamboard or Miro allows students and teachers to interact on the same blank screen. They include features like sticky notes, drawing tools, and shapes. You can have students use these whiteboards to populate feedback on their peers' presentations or other activities. These digital tools are further described in Handout 3 on pages 45 to 48 of your Facilitator's Handbook. We're not promoting any of these specific tools, we're just showing them as examples of what's available. Remember, you should always consult with IT professionals regarding compliance with district protocols on security and privacy as you determine which tools to use. Let's see an example of how to use one of these technologies. We used Google Forms as a way to facilitate peer feedback on the Nearpod and video feedback example we used earlier. Instead of providing the student feedback myself, we've asked the students' peers to provide this feedback. This will save us some time, and as Mary just described, will benefit the students as well. The link to the form is on your screen if you want to check it out or share it during your training. You can also see the questions I included in the table shown here. Using this form, we were able to address the 2 considerations Mary noted for implementing peer feedback. By providing a feedback form, we can help students provide good quality feedback. The form includes check all that apply and text box questions that will guide the peer feedback to give us the information we need to assess whether the student has achieved the goal of the assignment. Additionally, students can provide their feedback through a link, which allows the feedback to be anonymous, though you can still choose to collect emails to see who has completed the activity or not. Once peers have completed their Google form, we can review the feedback in a summary report directly in Google Forms or by downloading a Google Sheet, which is shown in this table here. Now I'll turn it over for Victoria.
Great, thank you, Beth. Now, we'll spend just a few minutes summarizing our learning. Let's recap. Monitoring student progress and providing feedback are important parts of formative assessment, which is crucial to students' academic progress. We reviewed several methods for monitoring student progress and demonstrated some tools that can be used for that purpose, including chat, poll, and other digital tools like Nearpod. We considered the characteristics of effective feedback and described ways to provide it using tools like the find function, microconferences, and audio and video feedback. There are also platforms that facilitate peer feedback, such as PeerGrade, PeerStudio, Jamboard, and Miro. So at this point in the live presentation, we move participants to virtual breakout rooms to engage in a discussion about what struck them during the workshop. Participants spent 15 minutes in breakout groups before sharing out common themes from their discussions with the whole group. If you are viewing this recording individually or with a small group, this is a good time to stop the recording and pause to reflect on the following prompt. What struck you during today's workshop that could be useful in your efforts to better monitor student progress and provide feedback in a remote setting, or to help the teachers you work with to do so? So this is a good time to pause the recording to reflect on these questions on your own and to anticipate how this activity might work when you deliver this training. Emma, I'll turn over to you now to close us out.
Thank you so much, Victoria. As a reminder, we are providing the following supports after each workshop to interested participants. When you present this workshop, you may want to consider supports you can provide to teachers in your district to discuss and answer follow-up questions about the workshop material. Here is our contact information if you would like to reach out to us. You can visit us at our website. You can also follow us on Twitter, or you can email us. Thank you for watching this recording.